Penn State football and James Franklin land a commitment for the class of 2025. It's a three-star offensive lineman. And once again, Penn State is able to find that diamond in the rough that other schools just continue to overlook.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Penn State fans? That is right. You are Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, bringing you all things Penn State Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. It's that easy. It's that simple. And if you're new to the channel, become an everyday or subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for all the latest analysis truly around your favorite Penn State sports. All of them. Penn State football, talk Penn State recruiting, men's basketball, wrestling, men's hockey. And that's what this show is going to be devoted to today. A pretty even split between Penn State football, wrestling in the next segment, and then the final segment recapping men's basketball's trip out to Columbus against the Ohio State Buckeyes, where they did not win. But we start off with Penn State football recruiting as James Franklin lands a commitment in the class of 2025, and it's from a three-star offensive lineman, Owen Aliciene. Once again, people might say, oh, Penn State's taking a commitment from a three-star prospect. Are they settling? What are they doing here? And that is not the case. It's not the case. Once again, Penn State is just good at beating other schools to the punch. They find the diamonds in the rough. They find the prospect that other schools are overlooking. They get in at the ground level and ride the elevator all the way to the top, because as we see, as these recruiting rankings get better, they get finalized, there's more tape of these players. You see, with all the prospects, what prospect do I need to name from the class of 2024? Whether it's Luke Reynolds or Ethan Grunkmeyer, that saw their ratings elevate so much from lowly 3 stars to ultimately, in the case of Reynolds, who became a 5-star tight end, and Grunkmeyer, who became a top 10 quarterback among the different recruiting sites. But this is another case. Owen Aliciene, who projects as an offensive tackle because he has a 6'7" frame, but this is a prospect that right now isn't rated as highly, but is probably going to rise as the rankings become finalized. So, but think of Garrett Sexton, who was out of the state of Wisconsin and ended up seeing a similar thing. Offensive tackle, lowly rated, and then started to garner a lot more respect and credibility. And Penn State was the first one there recruiting him primarily, and that's why I committed to the Nittany Lions. And it's the same thing here with Owen Aliciene. And it also, anytime a prospect commits as early as they do, that is a good sign for Penn State. I know there's decommitments here and there. And we're going to talk about Jalen Matthews too, but Aliciene to commit like this in the cycle tells me that he wants to be at Penn State, and Penn State wants him to be at Penn State, be a Nittany Lion. So this is, it's the same song and dance, but it works. This blueprint works. Penn State recruits in a way that not many other schools do, where they find prospects that are just completely underrated, that are severely underrated with a lot of upside. And that's what you're getting in Aliciene. Aliciene being overlooked, he impressed at different Penn State football camps, of course, was at the junior day this past weekend, and then announces his commitment, liked everything that he saw. Of course, Bill Troutwine recruiting him, the offensive line coach, and then everything is here. Second offensive line commit. So Penn State is continuing to do this where they're going to stack each class that has about 4 or 5 offensive line commits. Now, Jalen Matthews decommitted from this class, and we know that he's going to be one of the best offensive tackle prospects when all said and done in the class of 2025. And never say never, he could come back around, because he did list Penn State in his top schools. So Penn State still has a fighting chance. But now you're just adding another one. Brady O'Hara is that other prospect that is going to be in this class. Now, Penn State is continuing to solidify this group. So 8th commitment overall, 2nd offensive line commit. Definitely, there will definitely be more. And 7th overall, according to Rivals. So firmly in the top 10 right now for the moment. But there is going to be movement, of course, as these rankings continue to adjust and more players commit. It's early, but this class is taking shape. Penn State is continuing to forge ahead with this identity of building the offensive line, trying to get multiple running backs. And I like this class because so far you have multiple offensive linemen, you have multiple running backs, and then you are building the secondary. So Penn State is doing what it's done consistently since 2022. 2023, 2024, and now 2025. Of course, there were different elements there to those classes as well. But at the base of it, you get your quarterback commit, and Penn State got one early with Bekeem Kritza, who was on campus again. You have the 2 offensive line commits, and more will follow. I could see 4, maybe 5 again as they continue to build the depth. Then the multiple running backs. That is key. Penn State is always aiming. They're trying to get 3 in this class. They already have 2. They're trying to get 3. And then they have defensive backs, guys that projected defensive backs, Xavier Thomas and Amari Gaines, those 2 players. And then they have so far 1 linebacker in DJ McClary, but certainly they have a lot of top prospects they are recruiting, because we are going to talk about some of those other ones, Anthony Sacca, Elijah Melendez, and how all of those visits went that were crucial for Penn State in this class of 2025. But more on Owen Aliciene, since he actually is verbally committed. Avon Old Farms up in Connecticut. So Penn State has been recruiting the state of Connecticut very well. Of course, Luke Reynolds is from their 5-star tight end and listed as the 3-star across all the recruiting sites. But I imagine that this rating is going to go up. Aliciene Penn State continues to recruit these offensive tackle prospects that just have insane, freakish size. And you can't teach that. You can't teach someone to be 6'7", 6'8", have this long frame to go up against these massive Big Ten defensive ends. And that's what Penn State's trying to do, to anchor the pocket so that these defensive ends don't get any sort of advantage. And that's what Penn State is seeing. So Penn State is evaluating these players and saying, hey, who will respond the best? Because right now, this isn't someone that's going to come in and play right away. Let's just be honest. Aliciene is a raw prospect that still needs time to develop and is probably going to redshirt. But right now, currently 6'7", 270 pounds. Can you add 30 to 40 pounds in your redshirt freshman year? Probably. We've seen Penn State do it before. We've seen other just anywhere across the board. Let's take Tony Rojas, for example. I know he played as a true freshman, but added 30 pounds when he enrolled early. If Aliciene, that's really far out to project, but if he wants to enroll early and add that weight, maybe he can contribute in his first season. But as we've seen, that's not always the case. Let's take an Alex Birchmeyer, for example, who did take that redshirt freshman season, or Chimney Ono just recently in this class of 2023. So every plan is different, but you saw Javen Williams play right away. I see Cooper Cousins playing right away for Penn State in this upcoming season out of the class of 2024. True freshman. He already has the size. He's enrolled early and one of the leaders of that class. But Aliciene projects very well. Like I said, a lot of upside. Now, characteristics that I actually like about his game: very quick for someone with this size, moves very well for his frame. He carries the weight. He already carries the build very well. He doesn't look unnatural or anything like that. He's very confident and comfortable with the way that he moves laterally. And of course, and seeing him in the drills when he's a pass blocker, just the speed, the pure athleticism. I think so footwork maybe could use a little bit of more here and there, but it's good to begin with. It's good to begin with, but just initial observation, really like hand placement. He really knows how to fight with the hands and knows how to engage defenders, pass rushers coming at him. So this is a small sample size, but just seeing some observations at camps that he was at for Penn State, and you like what you see immediately, and that's why Penn State is taking this commitment. So another high upside player. It's going to take some time, but does project well. Probably, I would say, at right tackle, but never know, could end up being that blind side offensive tackle as well. Could be that left tackle for Penn State in the future. Now, they're players of note because there were dozens at this junior day for Penn State, and the ones that are the most important, we'll begin with Alvin Henderson. Henderson, I was intrigued by, because another 4-star running back. Penn State already has 2 running backs committed in this class of 2025, and Henderson being as talented as he is, could go anywhere. I don't want to say an instant contributor, but will definitely garner. He's going to garner a lot of offers, which he has to this point, but a lot of attention. And he did not make the trip. So I'm wondering if that's going to be rescheduled or anything like that. He was not on campus, and him being scheduled to be there was already kind of attention grabbing for myself, but he did not make the trip. Legacy linebacker Anthony Sacca. This is one, and he said this in an interview. He said that he was excited to get to meet Tom Allen, see Penn State again, and everything else, and just really get to understand the new, because he was recruited by Manny Diaz, and now he's going to be recruited by the new defensive coordinator, linebackers coach, and Tom Allen. But this one isn't, just because he's a legacy player doesn't mean that he's all but guaranteed to Penn State. He's going to visit Notre Dame. He's got an upcoming visit with Michigan. He's being recruited heavily. So Penn State has to work overtime. Now, it seems like they made a good impression with him, but I don't have any indication. I don't have any lean that says, oh, yeah, Penn State's in the lead for this kid, or if it's any other school. It seems pretty even at this point. Trent Wilson, St. Francis Academy out of Maryland. We've seen Penn State recruit that school heavily, but not necessarily win all those battles. Trent Wilson is a primary recruit. If Penn State is going to be targeting anybody and should have anyone on the top of their big board for this class of 2025, it is Trent Wilson. I see someone, he is someone that can enroll early and play and be a contributor right away if all goes well. He projects as a defensive tackle. He's a high-end 4-star. I like Trent Wilson a lot. And it seems like Penn State is in the lead for him, but of course, it's kind of the same thing. It's an even battle to this point, and that recruitment is going to go on for a little bit longer. Now, this is something that Penn State rivals, HappyValleyInsider.com has been reporting. Dylan Callaghan-Crowley, guest on the show, had said this, but Alex Tash, we go back to linebacker. Tash, 4-star in-state linebacker out of Greater Latrobe, and this was someone that could be on commitment watch in the near future, that Penn State is expecting a commitment, or at least the recruiting sites are expecting a commitment from him very soon. So to go along with what Penn State already has in DJ McClary, this would be a nice addition. I mean, Penn State has been doing well despite the change from Manny Diaz to Tom Allen. The linebacker recruits, I should say, are showing up in numbers. Penn State had all of its top targets on campus for junior day. And the last one that I want to mention, I already mentioned his name, but Elijah Melendez, Miami of Florida commit. I find it intriguing that you're committed to the Hurricanes and you come up for junior day in the middle of winter to visit Penn State. That's all I'm going to say here. That's all I'm going to say. Now, Bekim Kritza, quarterback, doing his job, recruiting other players to join the class, put it out there on X, formerly known as Twitter, saying, make the right move, come home, to Melendez on social media. So hopefully that works. James Franklin has always said this, that the players are the best recruiters in the class. So you want those anchors in the class early on, because they end up ultimately being your best recruiters. The staff, Franklin himself, the coaches can all put in as much work as they can, but the ones that make the difference are the players that are completely bought in. And that's why you see these Penn State classes continue. Seriously, 2022, 23, 24, and the start of 2025 are all shaping up nicely because they had that initial group that bought in and was able to convince other players. So think of Cooper Cousins and Quentin Martin in this past class. Think of the Nicholas Singleton in 2022, right? To be able to get those other prospects and convince them to come to Penn State. So that's what it's looking like. A lot of excitement around this class of 2025 in the top 10 to start. So this is already has probably at a base, no lower than 15, could definitely finish inside the top 10 when all said and done. But that's a long way to go. Long way to go before early National Signing Day for the class of 2025. But this is a good start that they had, getting another offensive line commit in Owen Aliciene. Penn State Wrestling continues to dominate. Another shutout this season in Big Ten play as well. First, it was Indiana. Now it's Michigan State, as they had a dominant weekend. Takeaways from that, and how the freshmen just continued to impress. The youngsters for Penn State continue to dominate. We're going to discuss that next on the other side of this break. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. The NFL regular season has come to a close, but the playoffs are in full swing, and there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel. America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets. Guaranteed when you place a $5 bet, it's that simple. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is super easy to use. I use it myself, and there's so many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and so much more. If you like all of that, visit fanduel.com/locked on and make your first bet a layup. That's fanduel.com/locked on to get started. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. The Locked On Podcast Network is making history. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering each and every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Penn State wrestling defeats Michigan State 35-0. Another shutout in Big Ten conference play. And what else can be said about this wrestling team? Really, just dominating from 125 all the way down to heavyweight. Now, Penn State did have some of its backups in for this one. Greg Kirkfleet, Carter Starachi getting the day off. Continuing to see what they're going to do with Tyler Kasak at 149. But this is a Penn State lineup up and down that just does not have a weakness. Does not have a weakness. And it shows because Michigan State has some good wrestlers. Now, they're not this overly dominant lineup, or they're not an elite lineup, let's say that, but they have some really good wrestlers, and Penn State just made easy work of them. I mean, it was a very successful weekend. You dominate. You win by 18 against a top 15 team in Michigan, and then this is a 2-leg road trip, and then you go to Michigan State. You go to East Lansing, and you win again in shutout fashion. Really, like I said, what more can be said about this team? We're just finding out how elite they are, and the fact that they could have 10 All-American contenders here. I want to revisit Mitchell Messenbrink because I am just continuing to be impressed by this redshirt freshman. Transfers in and comes in, and his first year at Penn State. So let's even though he's a redshirt freshman for eligibility purposes, he is in his first season at Penn State, and he's unreal. He is on fire. 18-9 major decision over number 10 Caleb Fish at 165 pounds. Back-to-back majors against top 10 wrestlers because he embarrassed Cam Amin, number 7 Cam Amin, who was a 3-time All-American, and embarrassed him 12-1. If you weren't aware of Mitchell Messenbrink to this point, you should have been after the dual meet matchup against Cam Amin. But now you have to be against Caleb Fish. These are guys that he may wrestle again in the Big Ten tournament. These are people that he could face in the NCAA tournament. He was someone that I guess maybe could have slotted in as an All-American contender early on, like a preseason, like maybe an outside watch. But now it's getting to the point where people are discussing Messenbrink to be in the finals at 165, to go up against the likes of Keegan O'Toole, who wrestles for Missouri. And the reason I bring this up is because Flow Wrestling was doing an interview with Ben Askren. Ben Askren's one of the best Division I wrestlers ever, wrestled at Missouri. And so I guess he would know, right, with Keegan O'Toole being a Missouri wrestler now. But they asked him, and Ben Askren talked about it and said it's a very even matchup. He doesn't have a read as far as who would win. Both guys do a lot of things exceptionally well, but he said that he expects O'Toole and Messenbrink to be the finals of 165. And how we went from Messenbrink, cracking the starting lineup and being someone that wasn't recognized the way that he should have been, and now it's going to be him and O'Toole in the finals at 165. So if you didn't know about Messenbrink to this point, now you do. And it's not that he's just inside of the top 10. He's an elite wrestler. He's one of the best 3 at 165. And I expect him to be in the finals for the NCAA championships. I expect him to be there. Not, oh, well, maybe he's on the outside looking in. No, it is him and, of course, Keegan O'Toole. Since he's been on that stage to this point, it's nothing should be short of what's expected here. Levi Haynes at 157, true sophomore, 17-0, improved 17-0 in dual meet matches to this point and won 7-6 over a number 21 Chase Saldate, who's probably going to face in the Big Ten tournament again. Who we'll see in the NCAA championships because there's a lot of wrestlers that are in that, but in tiebreaker too. And Saldate is very, very good. Don't say why, Levi Haines as the number one wrestler at 157 should be able to make quick work of the number 21 Saldate. Saldate is a senior veteran. He's been around. He's been competitive. That number 21 ranking is a little bit surprising this season for him, but he's definitely underrated. If you're going to look at ranking alone and say that, oh, Levi Haines should have definitely been able to win that one by more, Saldate is very, very talented and should not be overlooked to that point. But what continues to impress me about Levi Haines is he's just finding ways to win. That is what separates you from the good, great category into the elite top of your class. For Haines, who has been down in matches he shouldn't be, or in close, he gets tangled up with some of these wrestlers where he should be winning by 4, 5, 6 points, should be able to major some of these opponents. And he just continues to find ways to win. And that's all that matters at the end of the day, because Penn State will take care of it in the dual meets on the scoreboard. But when it comes down to just survive and advance, survive and advance, survive and advance. And I think that's what Levi Haines is looking to do. Not intentionally, but he's just finding ways to win. It's this gritty, not pretty. And I'm very impressed with it. And I think that's what he's learned here is that he doesn't need to win 10-0. He doesn't need to necessarily pin his opponent all the time. Survive and advance, win any way that you can. And that's where his game has taken another level. He is doing things that he's already picked up from his true freshman season, taking it over into his sophomore campaign. And the way that he wrestles is just very mature. It's very knowledgeable, instinctive. He's not overthinking anything by any means. And I like what we've seen out of Haines. And another situation here where you just fully expect him to be in the thick of it. Anything short of an NCAA finals appearance, I won't call it a disappointment, but these are lofty expectations for guys that we know that can handle it for this Penn State wrestling team. And everything else has been status quo in this dual meet. Aaron Brooks dominated. That's no surprise there. 197, moves from 184 to 197, and continues to make easy work of all of his opponents. True freshman Braden Davis remains undefeated, picks up another win. And as I mentioned earlier, Carter Starachi, Greg Kirkfleet got the day off. And Michigan State just doesn't have the roster to compete with this Penn State team. Penn State was exceptional last year, another national championship, but somehow this team has gotten better, and all of them are still relatively young. Yes, you have your veterans in Starachi, Kirkfleet, Brooks. I know that, Bernie Truax, but the emergence of Messenbrink, Braden Davis, Levi Haines continuing to hold it down. You have Tyler Kasak, who Penn State needs to figure out as far as what they want to do with his eligibility here. We'll get some clarification on that. Talk to Jeff Byers, the voice of Penn State Wrestling, to figure out what's going to happen there, if there's any idea. But all these young wrestlers, Aaron Nagao dominates, picks up from getting pinned against Michigan, right? Doesn't let that haunt him in the next dual meet. And those are the takeaways there, that everything was status quo, but the things that each individual wrestler kind of needs to correct, figure out, learn from, as we've heard from Cale Sanderson in the latest press conference and a meeting with the media, saying that we just need to learn from some of our mistakes. And everyone continues to learn and sets these individual goals that they're accomplishing week in and week out. But like Michigan State, Maryland doesn't have that great of a roster as well. Penn State Wrestling doesn't have back-to-back dual meets like this, so they get the full week to prepare for Maryland. It is another road trip. Penn State will travel again, but then it does get a little more serious after that. So the upcoming schedule with some of the other schools on the horizon, Iowa, Rutgers, Nebraska, all coming down the pipeline. So this is kind of the last chance for Penn State to fine-tune some things, use these dual meets as tune-up matches for the bigger competition. Just because Penn State's created some distance between Iowa and the likes, again, Nebraska, Rutgers, these are much better schools when it comes to wrestling, but they're not going to take that lightly, especially Iowa being out there in the Hawkeyes arena. That is going to be an exciting one. Penn State, of course, hosting Rutgers and Nebraska. But those teams are going to get up for Penn State to try to knock off number one. But another opportunity for Penn State to rest, rejuvenate, and then use Maryland for what it's worth as a practice tool meet in this case. Anything short of a shutout is not meeting expectations here. I fully expect Penn State to shut out Maryland in the week's time here coming up this next Sunday. Penn State men's basketball loses to Ohio State, goes out to Columbus, and it was an interesting one. This was a weird game. You look at the box score, and it just doesn't exactly tell you everything you need to know. We're going to discuss that on the other side. Remember, if you're not already, become an everyday or subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for all of the latest analysis around your favorite Penn State sports. Talking football, men's basketball, men's hockey, wrestling, recruiting, all of it is right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Penn State men's basketball goes out to Ohio State on this past Saturday and loses to the Buckeyes 79-67. This was a weird game. By any means, just okay. So let's talk about the box score first to explain why. Because if Penn State was going to lose this game, I said that Ohio State would have to clean up the turnovers, which they did. They did do that, but Penn State was going to have the three things that Penn State needed to make sure that they did. They needed to force those turnovers again. They didn't do that. Avoid the sluggish start in the first half. Well, they didn't do that either. And then shooting, they shot 46% from 3-point range. And that was the surprising part, because Penn State has been hit or miss with the 3-point shooting, or has been in the 30s, and it's been able to get them enough to the finish line to win some of these games. They shot 46% against a good Ohio State defense, and Ohio State, to go along with that, shot 17% from 3-point range. And they weren't overly dominated on the glass. We know that Penn State struggles with its rebounding, its defense. 43 rebounds to 36. So it's not like it's not like this was a one-sided rebounding contest for Ohio State and Penn State. But then you get to the free throws, and nobody got into foul trouble. Everyone kind of had an even contribution to the box score here with 2 or 3 fouls, but Penn State had committed 25 fouls in this game to Ohio State's 5. Ohio State was pretty clean at the free throw line. 22 of 25 will win you games. Penn State was 4 of 5. This is just too lopsided. So does this have to do with, again, Penn State's in a road environment and is playing a little undisciplined here? I'm not going to try to say, well, the refs, but we've just seen in college basketball and in the NBA as well, try to follow the NBA a little bit, and just seeing how lopsided these contests can be in terms of fouls and free throws is just, it's interesting. It raises a lot of questions here. It's too lopsided. I understand if this was 15, maybe 20 fouls to 10, something like that, but this was 25 to 5. Ohio State had 5 times the free throws compared to Penn State. But Penn State lost because of the foul problems here. Like I said, nobody got into foul trouble. Nobody had more than 3 fouls, but foul problems, obviously. The slow first half start once again. Penn State's got to find a way to correct that. The second half, and Penn State they came out firing in the second half. They scored 48 points, but Ohio State was prepared for this. They were not going to blow another double-digit lead in this case, and they had the game plan. They protected the basketball a lot more. Penn State didn't get to force as many turnovers like last time. So when you look at the box score, when you look at what Penn State was able to do successfully the first time around and get points on fast breaks, points off of turnovers, Ohio State only committed 6 turnovers this time around. So they had the game plan organized. They passed the ball better. Ohio State was prepared, and that's because they are a good team in the Big Ten this year. I will say this: if there was anything that Penn State had a positive to take away, is that this is still a competitive basketball team that just needs to gel in terms of chemistry, but they're still moving puzzle pieces around. And I think we have a little more light at the end of the tunnel here for Penn State. Penn State didn't start Puff Johnson in this game. And Puff Johnson had double figures with 20 minutes off of the bench. So that's a good sign. They put Nick Kern Jr. into the starting lineup. And I've been saying that Kern deserves a lot more playing time, deserves a lot more responsibility. Kern has been someone that's just a defensive assassin. He can guard, just maybe not Zach Edey, but I'm serious when I say he can guard your point guard. He can guard just about almost any 4 or 5. Zach Edey, of course, is an exception here. But Kern plays very good defense top to bottom and creates headaches for your best player. But now his offensive game has risen to another level, and he was in double figures as well. So like I said, Penn State has some things that say, hey, we have something to work with here. 3-point shooting was better. You're coming out in the second half and you're scoring 48 points. Okay. It's avoiding those slow starts in the first half. You're down 33-19 at the end of the first half on the road. Ohio State's already playing from a much better advantage here, but Penn State didn't get out rebounded. This is a 12-point game on the road to a quality Buckeyes team that is now 13-5. Penn State's 3-5 in conference, so it's not like, again, they're not at the bottom. I will say that Kanye Clary and Ace Baldwin didn't take a little bit of a step back in this game. Ohio State was very keen on defending them, 13-10 respectively for Clary and Baldwin, but having Kern give you 12, having Johnson give you 13 off of the bench, 4 players in double figures, that is a good sign. And the first time we've seen that in Big Ten play for this Penn State team, and I've said that, Penn State needs more diversity in its scoring. You can't just rely on Clary and Baldwin to put up 25 and 15 every single night, because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You take away one of them, and then Penn State's offense, I won't say is abysmal, but definitely is lacking. So now that you have more options here available to you, you can do more damage as Big Ten play rolls on. Now, the next 4 games here, Penn State has the opportunity to go and win 3 out of the 4. They have a full week to rest and prepare. Like Penn State wrestling has the chance to go up against Maryland and take care of business here. But Penn State has a favorable matchup at home in the Bryce Jordan Center, which we've seen they like playing at home more than they do on the road. But Minnesota is a much favorable matchup. This is a team that's not very good in the Big Ten. They should be able to, with a full week of rest, they get a true 7 days of rest here this upcoming Saturday. They take on the Golden Gophers. Then at Rutgers having a down year. Now it is on the road, and we've seen them struggle in Piscataway, but this is not the same Rutgers team that they have been in the past. At Indiana is a tough beat. That's the game that I would lean and say, okay, this one's not as winnable. And then you return home and you play Iowa. So I would say here, Iowa, Rutgers, and Minnesota. Minnesota's, you have to win that one. If you lose that one against Minnesota, then we have some serious problems. We have some serious concerns. I like this Penn State team. I think they're entertaining. I think they're fun. Mike Rhodes has made a lot of good impressions in his first season. The players immediately buying in. They just naturally gravitate to him. They follow his direction, follow his leadership. It's a roller coaster, but everyone has stayed along for the ride. I don't get any sense that the morale that anybody on Penn State has been let down from the fact that, oh, bad loss here against Purdue, embarrassing loss against Michigan State. Of course, the earlier loss in the season to a Bucknell, the players still continue to follow along, buy in, and the emotion and the energy is high on this Penn State team. And I like that. But I think there's potential to win 3 out of the 4 next games. And then we can start talking and just like say, hey, if everything falls into place, what does the Big Ten tournament look like? Is there really any shot at an NCAA tournament berth? A lot would have to go right, but we saw Penn State went on that Cinderella run last year with Micah Shrewsbury. It can be done. Big Ten schedule's unforgiving, so let's see how it all unfolds. But it starts here. These next 4 games are a turning point for Penn State, for the better or for the worse, depending on how it goes. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. Remember to become an everydayer. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, to keep up with all of the latest analysis around it all. We're more than just Penn State football talk on this show. Talk recruiting. We'll talk men's basketball, men's hockey, wrestling, all of it. And stay tuned for more episodes, more content around your favorite Penn State sports right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.